Allison K. Hymas is an alumni of BYU's undergraduate English program and creative writing MFA program. She writes poems and short stories that have been published in Rivet, Flare, Sassafras, and Dark Matter. She has also published 2 middle grade novels with Aladdin/Simon & Schuster, Under Locker and Key, and Arts and Thefts, both about a 12-year-old boy who works as a retrieval specialist at his middle school, returning what others steal. When she's not writing, Allison enjoys reading, cooking, and running long distances. As I've read Allison's middle grade series, I've come to love how her prose bring Jeremy Wilderson, the main character, and also a recovery specialist for middle schoolers, to life. Allison has a great way of connecting to her audience through fast-paced plotting and the hilarious internal monologues of Jeremy Wilderson. She has created a fun world in which characters strive to do what's right and figure out what that means when they have to break the rules to do the right thing. Allison's next novel, The Explorer's Code, is a puzzle story about 3 kids who solve the mystery of an old manor house, and it will be released, I saw 2 release dates, early 2021 or September? September 2020. The internet lies. It's September 2020. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Allison Hymas.
Thank you. So a note about the internet lying is we were not at first sure whether or not we'd be able to make the September 2020 deadline for Explorer's Code, so we decided to say it was later and then surprise everybody with happy things if it was earlier. So that's why we have that lie. Thank you. I am so humbled and overjoyed to be here. I have come to the reading series many times before, and I've loved them, and I'm just so honored to be able to stand here and speak as part of, and read my books as part of this reading series. So I'm going to begin by reading from my first book, Under Locker and Key. And this book has ties to BYU more than some of my other books do. I first came up with the idea for this book in a class that I took from Andy Ellis here at BYU. And I had to come up with a character, which is when I came up with the character of Jeremy Wilderson, a thief for hire, but don't call him that. He prefers to be called a retrieval specialist. From that character sketch grew a short story, which grew into a novel, which I didn't take seriously as a book that I could actually publish until I showed it to another of my professors, Chris Crow, and he encouraged me to seek publication. And so if it wasn't for the teachers here at BYU, I don't think this book would have happened at all, and I'm really grateful for that. BYU's got such a great writing program. Anyway, I'm going to read a section from Under Locker and Key. So to give some context for the scene I'm about to read. This story is about a 12-year-old boy, Jeremy Wilderson. He will steal things back for people instead of stealing outright. So he'll take back somebody's confiscated cell phone, or their stolen lunch money. In this story, he gets tricked by a guy named Mark, and Mark convinces him to steal a key that opens every locker in the school. At the time, Jeremy doesn't know that's what it is, but he passes it off to Mark, and then he finds out after with the fact that Mark is now going to use this key to steal from everybody. So Jeremy is now in a situation where he is the one who stole this key. He's the one who's in trouble. He has done something wrong, and he wants to make it right. And to do that, he's going to need some help. So there is a girl in his school who's a private investigator and absolutely hates him. And unfortunately, she is the best choice. So I'm going to read the scene where he brings his plan to her and tries to convince her to join his scheme to get this key back. Okay. I know I said I wanted an exciting job, but this was becoming too exciting. Mark had the key and was not afraid to use it. The next day, I'd be busy with kids looking to hire me to retrieve the stuff they lost, and on top of that, I'd have to work on a plan to outwit Mark. I meant what I said to Mark. The job wasn't done yet. This whole mess was my fault because I'd stolen the master key, so it was my responsibility to take it back. It's just what I do: retrieve stolen property and return it to its rightful owner. Mom would be so proud of me if she knew about my work. But I wasn't blind to the challenges. I would have to find the key, a 3-inch long piece of metal that Mark could have duct taped into his armpit for all I knew, and I wouldn't put it past him. Then I would have to return everything he took without getting caught by him or any of the teachers, who wouldn't understand if the stolen goods turned up in my backpack. And the clock was ticking. The job was a lot to handle. Too much for one guy. Ask Case and Hack. And aside, Case and Hack are his best friends. One of them is a forger, one of them is a hacker. Birds of a feather. Anyway, ask Case and Hack? No, definitely not. They would help me, but as long as the key was missing, my back had a target painted on it. If Case and Hack got involved and helped me poke around, they'd get that same target on theirs. Mark could easily point the finger at me. It would only take a few more words to implicate my friends. This wasn't dealing with a few dollars of lunch money. This job had high stakes. Also, if Mark's plan worked and he started to accumulate street cred as he committed his crime spree, he could get a few more friends. Big friends. Nasty friends. Friends who liked to hurt people. I was certain Mark would send those friends after me and anyone who helped me if I tried to get the key back. Giving up the master key to Mark was not an option. I could put myself in harm's way over a mistake I made, but I wouldn't ever put Case and Hack in that position. No, Case and Hack had to stay in the dark on this one. Plus, I wouldn't need a forger or a hacker for this job. Hack could keep working on getting himself ungrounded, and Case could stay busy being art class's golden boy and working on his submission to the county's summer art competition. But I needed help. Someone athletic enough to handle goons, but smart enough to play whatever con was needed. I had some contacts in the underground who might help. Kids who tended to know where stolen stuff ended up. But they were thieves, and the master key was too tempting a prize. I had to find someone honest, someone the teachers would trust over Mark if he tried to implicate them in the theft, and someone who wouldn't take the package and run once the job was over. Someone who might put rules above everything, but cared about student welfare above her own personal gain. I only knew one person who fit the description, and after Mom drove me home, I walked across the street to talk to her. "Hey, Becca," I said when she opened her door. "Got a moment?" "If you're here to confess," she said, "I've got all the time in the world." I peered into her house. "Are you home alone?" Dad's working on his closing remarks, and Mom's leading a lead on a breaking and entering case. Why? I took the liberty of walking into her front hall. Because I don't want to be overheard by the lawyer and the cop. Yep, lawyer and cop, and Becca's their unholy offspring. She glared at me. "Rude much? Can you just close the door?" Becca did as I asked, but her face expressed how much she would have loved an excuse to throw me out the window, just like Miss Trunchbull from Matilda. After she shut the door, she turned to me with folded arms. "Well?" I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "All right, it was me. I stole the master key. I'm your thief." Becca beamed like Christmas had come early and Santa had given her the stun gun she wanted. "I never thought you'd actually give yourself up," she said, and laughed. "Hold on, let me get my camera so I can capture this moment and keep it forever." I grabbed her arm as she spun to go upstairs. "I'm not done yet," I said. "There's a lot more to this. We might want to sit down." She led me to the kitchen table, where we sat, and I told her about Mark and how he used me to get the key. Becca didn't look sympathetic. Her eyes and the tilt of her mouth screamed that I had it coming. When I explained Mark's plan to steal from the lockers, her composure cracked. But when I presented my proposal, it shattered completely. "No way am I helping you with any thief work." "Hear me out, Becca. Neither of us were sitting anymore." She paced the hardwood floor, circling the table, and I followed, trying to make her see the sense of joining forces. "Not going to happen, Wilderson. I've got what I want. You said you stole the key. You're going to do time in detention, and I'll be there to see it. Maybe even try to get everything you've done on your permanent record. Problem solved." "Not quite," I said. She stopped pacing and looked at me. I grinned. You don't have me. You confessed. Maybe, I said. But if I did, it was off the record. I didn't say anything in front of an authority figure. I didn't write it down. And I didn't do anything stupid like, say, let myself get captured on film saying it. And proof is everything, isn't it, in your business? Becca's mouth opened and she swelled like she was going to yell at me, but nothing came out. She knew I was right. She had nothing but what I was willing to give her. And suppose you did get me on record, I added. Best case scenario, you'll have me, but Mark will have the key, and Scottsville will be trapped in a massive crime spree. You'll have solved nothing. For a moment, Becca looked unsure, but before long, the old hard-boiled facade returned. She leaned against the table, facing me. I know Mark has the key. All I have to do is turn him into the principal. I sat down and leaned back in the kitchen chair, 2 legs tipped off the floor, and looked up at her. It'll be Mark's word against yours. And if he doesn't have the key on his person, you'll have no proof. Becca pushed back on my chair, sending me crashing to the floor with a thud. I should drag you into school and force you to confess in front of the principal. Then they'd know you stole the key and that Mark has it now. Flat on my back, I waited until the pain subsided before giving her my best innocent expression. Imagine how silly you would look when I said I had no idea what you were talking about. Silence. Becca walked around the table as I stood up and returned the chair to its place. She sat down across from me with the sun streaming through the window behind her. This, she said, this is why I hate you. You think you can get away with anything. And what's worse, you always can. She slammed her fists down on the table. Yeah, I said, Mark said something like that. He wants people to fear him like they fear me. Becca leaned back. Her face was shadowed, but I saw her smiling. Oh, that's what you think it is. That's what Mark thinks. Personally, I'd rather not be feared. I hated the thought that Mark was right, and the only reason I was good at stopping bad guys was because I was the nastiest monster out there. That's not who I wanted to be. Let me tell you something, Wilderson, Becca said in a mild tone that made me think this was a bedtime story I'd prefer not to hear. Remember the Rance McLeod job? I thought back. A stolen skateboard. Becca nodded. That's the one. Rance McLeod, 7th grader, stole a skateboard from 6th grader Jake Piedmont. It was a simple job, one of my first, back in October. I'd been noticing some strange things going on since school started, Becca said. People losing things and then getting them back. Doors unlocked when they should have been locked. I saw Jake without the skateboard in the morning, and then I saw him leaving school with it. What can I say? I work fast. I talked to Jake, and he gave me your name, Becca said. I investigated, but I found no evidence of theft. So I took Rance's statement. He told me that he knew you retrieved the skateboard from his locker, and that you were behind a number of similar cases. But do you know what? What? The word was a trap. I shouldn't have said it. When I asked Rance to come with me and tell Principal McDuff what you did, testify against your vicious rule-breaking, he refused. Why? Because he said you'd once retrieved a retainer for him, and he might need you to do it again one day. Becca bared her teeth and leaned over the table. People aren't scared of you, Wilderson. They're scared that one day you won't be there to help them when they need you. Oh. I leaned, one-handed on the table, and thought, now that's better than being feared. Well, that's good. No, it's disgusting. Becca stood up and jabbed a finger at me. Why should you get away with crime when no one else can? Why are you above the rules? Who made you so special? And then, after I talked to Rance, you had the gall to rub your illegal security in my face by asking me to join you. Someone needs to make you pay, just like everyone pays. And if no one else will put together a case against you, then I guess I'll do it. Becca was shaking. Her pointed finger hung in the air, a physical accusation. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Go ahead, I said. Put together that case against me. But not right now. Mark is a bigger threat to the school than I am, and even though you hate me, I think you know that. Becca sank back into her chair, folded her arms, and nodded once. I nodded back. I might have a plan to get the key back, I said, and it won't work without you. Together we can return the key to the school, pin Mark with the crime, and go off to summer vacation with not a care in the world. But to do that, Becca said, we'd have to break the rules. A few, maybe. Lie, she said. Act dishonestly. Oh, definitely. She shook her head. Nope. Mom says the law's the law for a reason. People who break it only hurt other people and themselves. I agree. She glared at me. That's why no one should be above the law. Oh, now your little Miss Straight Arrow? Where was that moral compass when you snuck out of the cafeteria to spy on the teachers? She turned red. The teachers gave me the case. So you were spying on them? Afraid they didn't give you all the details? Becca slammed her fist on the table. That was for the greater good, not that you'd care about that. So you're above the law when it suits your needs, but when I bend a few rules to help someone, I'm Scottsville's most wanted? Becca glowered, but I continued before she could argue. This is for the greater good. You know we can't let Mark keep that key. I'm not going to ask you to pick locks or climb through windows. So, she said, what are you going to ask me to do? Pardon? Now Becca leaned forward, hands clasped. Bet she saw that on some cop show. I don't think you came to me just for help with a job. What's in this for you? I waited for her to answer her own question. When she didn't, I exploded. Immunity, okay? I don't want you to turn me in. You know that's what I want. Yeah, but I wanted to hear you say it. Becca shook her head. Untouchable Wilderson. Nothing ever sticks to him. If it helps, I said, consider this community service. Becca nodded. I could see the wheels turning in her head. Okay, Wilderson. It's a deal. If we get the key back, you walk on this one. Just this one, and only if we get the key back. If not, I'm bringing you in. And don't expect a pass for any other jobs you take on after this. Deal. I also have a couple of conditions. I sighed. Of course she did. What? First, no stealing. None. Not while we work together. She looked like she was going to throw up. I'm not getting tangled up in one of your dirty schemes. I don't steal, I said. I retrieve. None of that either, then. Just the key. You have my permission to grab that as long as you hand it over to me. I shook my head. Just the key? Are you crazy? Mark's out there with a key that opens every locker in the school. He's not going to wait around to use it. I'm going to get flooded with clients the minute I set foot in school, and you're telling me I can't help them while we do this? Becca folded her arms. No deal, no help. I simmered. Fine. Deal. What else? You run everything you plan to do past me. You don't pick up a penny in the cafeteria before I hear about it. She had me, and she knew it. You're annoying, you know that? Becca glared at me. I stuck out my wrist. Want me to wear a tracking bracelet, too? Thought about it, she said. They're too expensive. Becca smirked. I'm excited now. I get to see the great Jeremy Wilderson in action and learn all his tricks. I'll know what evidence to look for next time I investigate one of your heists. I revived the wide-eyed look of innocence. How do you know I haven't seen the light and mended my wicked ways? You can put away the sappy face. I know you too well. Ooh, really? I leaned forward. Well enough to know that believing you'll stop stealing is like believing a fox will stop raiding chicken coops. You think I'm a fox? I said. I gotta say, I'm flattered. Was that you checking me out at our last track meet? Becca rolled her eyes. Just lay out this plan you've cooked up. So I did. All right. So at this point, you're probably pretty aware I enjoy writing stories that are fun and twisty. I love writing mysteries and heist stories like the Jeremy Wilderson books because I like to be the one who solves the problem first. It's one of my favorite moments when I figure out how they did it. So the extension of that train of enjoyment when I write moved on to the book that is coming out this September, The Explorer's Code. So that book, I was pretty heavily channeling the Westing game and Agatha Christie when I was writing it, so that's the kind of thing you can expect. It's about 3 kids who have the chance to take part in a weekend event at a manor house. It's called Idlewood Manor in the Shenandoah Mountains in Virginia. So there's a group of people there, lots of different guests, but we have these 3 kids, Charlie and Anna, our brother and sister, and then Emily. And while these kids are there, they start to uncover the mystery in the house. So I'm going to read a section from this book where one of the characters, Anna, who has a penchant for getting into trouble for exploring in places she's not allowed to go, a love of exploring that is also fueled by her love of a fictional explorer that I created named Virginia Maines, who lived in the 1920s. So she has realized that this house has a third floor if you look at it from the outside. But if you go inside the house, there is no staircase to that third floor. So she's trying to find a way into that third floor. So I'm going to read part of this book where she takes another stab at finding this third floor. Anna hadn't really cared for lunch. It was ham sandwiches and some salad loaded with cottage cheese. She would have preferred spaghetti, but her parents liked the old-fashioned food from an old-fashioned time, and that made them happy, which meant they gave her a quick, "Don't do it again" lecture about going through other people's rooms before turning back to their meal. Charlie, who's her brother, wasn't much fun either. She had to shake him out of his thoughts to get him talking. Before long, he was lost in his own world again. Not even mentioning the library was enough to keep him in the present. The only other thing to do was listen to the other guests introduce themselves to each other. The couple Anna had spotted outside, the ones with the little bundle. Their sports sunglasses pushed up on their foreheads, were talking to the matching t-shirts family. And two single guests, pins all over Suitcase Man and the book lady, had chosen seats next to each other and were having a fevered conversation in low voices. The woman had one of her books on her lap. This one was titled DNA Coding for Fun and Profit. The slew of old women in pastel shorts and blouses were buzzing in and out of the room so often that Anna couldn't count them. And Anna's parents were busy talking to the couple from the airplane room. "This is a nice house," Mr. Mustache was telling them, "but I think the weather is too wet here." "Not good for the respiratory systems," his wife, Quilted Bag, said, waving a hand at her throat. "That time we visited Key Largo was much more invigorating. Still, the trees are lovely." "Why come, then?" Anna's father said. Mr. Mustache settled back in his chair. "Contest winners," he said, patting his wife's arm. "We enter so many contests for vacations. That's how we went to Key Largo, and when I looked up the history of Idlewood, I wanted to come see it for myself." "It's also nice to get away," Quilted Bag said. "I work at a publishing house. It can get intense." "Winners, right?" Anna's mom said with a smile. "Well, as a matter of fact, so are we." No one seemed to want to talk to Anna herself, not even Mr. Mustache's wife, who smiled from across the table and offered Anna a butterscotch candy from her colorful bag as her husband and Anna's mom spoke. So Anna finished lunch and ran outside, sticking the candy in her pocket. Garrett the gate man was out there setting up wickets for croquet. Her parents were planning on playing it after lunch, but Anna's own plans included vanishing until after the game was over. Anna waved at her and called out, "How's your first day here? Having lots of fun?" But she just waved and ran past. Anna explored the grounds, finding an evergreen maze behind the house, but as she wandered to the maze, she realized she kept raising her eyes to that elusive third floor. No, there had to be a way to get there. An explorer didn't give up just because something was hard. Virginia Maines wouldn't have found that French treasure room if she wasn't persistent. Anna must have missed something. Annoyed, Anna turned away from the maze and hurried back into the house. The dark-haired snob's parents were examining a vase and leaped away, looking startled as Anna marched by. Why were all the adults so jumpy around her? She marched to the big bookcase on the second floor. Without removing the books this time, Anna wrapped her fingers around one of the shelves like she was about to pull on a door. With a grunt, she did. And with a click and a squeak, the bookshelf hung open on a hinge. Anna almost fell over. It worked. She thought she'd pulled like that before. Well, apparently she hadn't. She pushed the door open, a staircase lined with a rug that must have once been beautiful, but was now gray with dust, stretched up to the third floor. The air seemed heavy, muffling out the sounds of people going back to their rooms after lunch, or heading out to claim their balls and mallets. This is what it felt like to see something no one had seen in a long time. This is what it felt like to be a real explorer. Anna closed the door behind her and climbed the dusty stairs. The stairs to the third floor were silent as Anna ascended. The layers of dust cushioned her steps, making her feel like a ghost floating along. At the top of the stairs was a long hallway. It was dark and smelled musty, and Anna had to cover her nose and mouth to keep from coughing and sneezing. She didn't know how thin the walls or ceiling were, and she didn't want to get caught again. The carpet stretched down the hall. Mouse droppings littered the ground, and cobwebs bridged the walls to the ceiling overhead. No one had been here, not for years and years. The silent air felt heavy with the weight of what this third floor had been a long time ago, but wasn't anymore. Who had lived here? Why had it been blocked off, but not walled off for good? Anna tiptoed down the hall and stopped at the first room. She laid her hand on its dusty door handle. If she had a floor of a building that was off limits, she would seal all the doors so no one could get in. But what if? She turned the knob, the door opened, creaking as she pushed it. Inside was a bedroom, a huge brass bed frame pressed against the wall. The metal had corroded, turning green, and the mattress was gone. There was also a dresser, which, when Anna checked it, was totally empty. She went to the window. Pale light shone through the dingy glass, and down below the other guests were playing croquet. Her own parents were down there, playing as a team. Her mom hit the ball into the lake. Charlie was nowhere to be seen. Anna stepped away from the window and went to the closet. It was empty, except for a dress left hanging on a hook inside the door. Once it had been a pale blue with a deep neckline, and a skirt that looked like it would be fun to twirl in. But now the blue was barely visible beneath the dust, and in places the color had bleached and faded to a gross yellow. There were holes where mice and moths had nibbled the fabric. She touched it, the cloth silky under her fingers. "Who did you belong to?" Anna breathed, then coughed on the dust swirling around her, loosened from the dress by her touch. Mr. Llewellyn had given the family a history of Idlewood, but Anna hadn't had a chance to read it before the mystery upstairs took all her attention. She rubbed the cloth gently between her hands. It must have been an expensive dress. For a moment, Anna considered taking it with her as proof she found the place, but that would be wrong. It belonged here, in this dusty secret floor. Anna closed the closet and left the room. She closed the door behind her and went her way to the next room. Each one was like the last, old, dusty, and empty. Here and there she found remnants of the family that used to live in the house. A few hairpins, a man's shoe. Out in the hall, on a chair, was a stack of books. Anna picked up the top one. Its cover had been torn off, but it still looked familiar. She set it back down and kept exploring. At the end of the hall, Anna turned left and discovered another long hall. This one had no doors on either side, but there was one down at the end. Anna's heart sped up as she ran to the door, but when she pulled on the handle, it didn't move. She sighed and looked around. The door to the third floor had been hidden, so maybe there was more than met the eye here, too. Anna took a step back and examined the door. The door itself looked like all the others in the house, except for the big carved one downstairs. Big, wooden, flat. But while the other doors were set in painted plaster walls, this one was set in gray stones, like the outside of the house. That did make sense. If Anna's mental map was correct, this hallway connected to the house's tower. Maybe the tower had been separate once, and the hallway added later to connect the rest of the house to it through this door. But if it was the same stone as the outside, maybe it was just as easy to climb. Ideas sparking, Anna set her hand on the stone. Yes, they were just as rough as the stones she climbed earlier this morning. But was there a ledge, like outside? Anna looked up and choked on dust. Her coughing and spluttering turned to laughter, echoing in the empty hall. "Oh my gosh," she said, "what kind of house is this?" A hole was cut into the ceiling just above the handholds Anna had found, a hole meant to accommodate a climber. Anna had a sudden vision of the rich lady in diamonds and that blue dress from the closet clambering up through the hole, and she snorted. Okay, so maybe not her. The husband, then? Who needed this kind of entrance to the tower when there was a perfectly good door? Only one way to find out. Anna couldn't have ignored this mystery, even if her parents, Charlie, and Mr. Llewellyn had begged her to. She rubbed her hands on her dusty clothes and began the climb. It wasn't any harder than the climbing stones outside. Anna lifted herself into a small room, cut off from the rest of the house, with unpainted walls. There was a small door in front of her. Very small. "Alice in Wonderland," she whispered, kneeling in front of it. The knob turned with a squeak, and soon Anna was crawling through the little door into the most marvelous room she'd ever seen. It was the inside of the tower, A spiral staircase wound around the stone outside, leading from the ground floor where Anna stood to several platforms above. Ropes hung from the platforms to the ground or stretched to the walls. Like the other rooms, this tower room was covered with dust. But unlike the others, this room wasn't emptied of its belongings. Items littered the ground, books, a chair or two, even stacks of plates and cups. Anna stepped tentatively inside. The stone walls were covered with maps and charts. The paper had yellowed with time, but their images were unmistakable. India, China, Africa. A map of the Pacific Ocean hung over an old, dusty sofa. She raised a hand to touch it, but stopped. She didn't want to destroy anything. Still, who had lived here? This room seemed different than the other rooms on the third floor. Those had belonged to a proper, wealthy lady and her gentleman husband. This tower was messy, lived in, forgotten. Maybe this was an office of some kind. Anna had no idea what kind of man Mr. Gardner was. Maybe he was a sea captain or a traveler in his own right, but it wasn't like any office she'd ever seen. She climbed the creaky stairs to the platforms above. On the first one, she found a locked chest. On the next, a wardrobe. When she looked inside, she found both women's dresses and men's jackets and pants made of heavy material. Maybe both Gardners used the tower. If so, they were much more interesting people than Anna had expected. And those ropes, some stretched taut like tight ropes between the platforms and the walls, and others that held wooden slats like sweet seats on swings. What were they for? I'm going to stop right there. All right, thank you. I believe it's time to open it up for some questions if anyone has any. Yeah?
So when I was looking at your work, I noticed that you also wrote poems and short stories in addition to children's novels.
Yeah.
What's your favorite to write, and why do you write in so many different genres?
Oh, that's such a hard question. What's my favorite to write in, and why do I write in so many genres? Wow. I have to say, I think my favorite is novel-length works. I like writing these longer stories because I feel like I get to do a lot more. I can have longer, more complex plots and have subplots and do more with the characters, develop them more. But I also really enjoy writing short stories. Sometimes I get an idea that's just not right for a novel. It's a short story, so I'll write a short story. And poetry is not my strongest suit. There are far better poets than me. I just enjoy writing some poems. So I get an idea for a poem, maybe I'll write that. So I guess long answer short, I prefer novels, but I will write anything if the idea takes me. All right, over there in the white shirt.
I was just going to ask, you said something in that last answer that struck me. You said that sometimes something isn't right for the novel length, so this was just for a short story. How do you kind of feel out when you get an idea in your head what genres would be the best for that idea?
All right, how do I feel out what genre is going to be best? Sometimes when I get an idea, I'll start to explore it. I will think about it. I'll think about the characters. I'll think about what the main point of the story is and how many characters it's going to affect. So if I find that the story is over a very short period of time, it's more a scene or just a quick event, or if it's if the focus of the story is more this moment of emotion, I might make it a short story. But if I'm thinking about it and I'm finding I have multiple characters that I want to explore, and if the plot is just developing and growing, which is actually what happened with Under Locker and Key. It started as a short story, but as I thought about it more, I'm like, hey, let's give them criminal friends, and let's expand on Becca, the nemesis, and see what happens with her. Then it grew into this novel. So when I explore the idea and it becomes complex, then that's when I turn it into it becomes a novel. Whereas if it remains dense and still complex but more short and focused, that's more of a short story for me. All right, I saw another hand. Yes.
My question, I really enjoyed the tone of the works that you're writing and the voice that your characters have.
Thank you.
So I was wondering how you go about writing the characters and the dialogue so that they seem authentic and age appropriate, especially with younger characters.
Well, first, I was extremely blessed to have a substitute teaching job where I took a lot of 6th grade classes. So that was helpful because I got to sit around and listen to these kids talk. And fun story about that, one of the kids brought me over to show me how he had managed to hack a neighboring teacher's computer from his computer. And I had to tell him to stop doing that as I'm taking notes on my hand for my criminal kids. So that was helpful. So listening to the kids, listening to how kids speak. I did a lot of revisiting of my childhood, reading my old journals, listening to music that I listened to when I was in middle school, looking at pictures of my middle school to return myself to what it felt like to be at that age. But also a lot of it comes down to the individual character. I got to know Jeremy's voice. I got to know who this kid was individually and found out that he was this too sarcastic for his own good know-it-all who liked wordplay. That was something I didn't expect from him until I started writing the character. And the more I got to know the character, the more the voice started to become natural to him. And it was informed by the research I did with the 6th graders, but I'd say mostly just learning who this person was. All right. Are there any other questions? Okay. Yes.
What are your writing habits, like your daily schedule?
Okay. I am not the most consistent writer. I'm not somebody who's always there in the morning writing because I feel like it's important to let projects sit and to think about them. So I'm always writing. I'm always thinking and brainstorming, but sometimes sometimes it doesn't look like I'm writing. Sometimes it looks like I'm just staring out the window listening to teeny bopper music from when I was in middle school. So on days when I am physically writing, I like to write in the mornings. I have a word count that I try to reach, depends on the project. So if I'm drafting, it'll be somewhere between 1,500 to 2,000 words a day. I'll try to get that out. And on days when I'm revising, I try to get at least one chapter revised per day, if not more, depending on how intense the revision is. So I prefer to write in the mornings because that's when my brain is fresh. That's when I'm the most inspired. I'm ready to work. And then I stop. I do the work that I want to do for the day, and then I stop. I don't want to tax my mind out too much. I don't want to write things that I know I'm going to have to rewrite later because I'm tired. So I will let myself stop, and then maybe I'll take a long walk and think about what I did, think about if I liked it, if I need to revise it some more, and then think about the next day's project. So, I worked on 2 chapters today, and the next chapter, Jeremy builds a rocket launcher. I don't know. How am I going to do that? And that's what I'll do. So I am a runner. I fully believe in rest days, and I apply that to my writing. So that's my schedule. All right. Yes? Partially. So the question, if you didn't hear, is the character of Becca inspired by Javert? Yes, partially. She is also partially inspired by Carlton Lassiter from Psych, and partially by Batman. Although I'm also wondering if Max the horse from Tangled found its way into that DNA. But those hardcore detective noir detectives that like to throw people against the wall to get what they want, that's Becca, who are completely, and so that's Becca plus the unwavering commitment to law and order that Javert has. Yes?
In terms of genre, do you feel free to start on anything that strikes your fancy, or do you get some, pressure from an agent to produce certain things?
Little of both. I have an agent who's willing to support me in whatever I write, so she's fantastic. She'll tell me if it's bad, of course, but she doesn't hold me to a genre. However, when I did go to my agent or my editor after the first 2 books came out, they said they wanted another book, and they're like, "You're good at capers and puzzles. We want capers and puzzles." So, and I had an idea. I had an idea for the Explorer's Code, and so I had this capers and puzzles idea. So that's why that one became next. So. There's a little pressure, at least from the editors, the publishing houses, to continue, following my typecast. But personally, I don't care about that. I'll write whatever I want. And I do enjoy writing puzzle books and mysteries, so I don't mind doing some of those. But I currently have some ideas for a fractured fairy tale, or actually I've got several fractured fairy tales. So fantasies, or ridiculous, other ridiculous middle school kid books that are not puzzle books. And I'm going to write them. If I like them, I'm going to write them. And I hope to find an editor who will choose those too. All right. Yes? Do I start at the end and then work backwards, or start from the beginning and work forward? Okay, so when I write a book, regardless of what kind of book it is, I tend to figure out the major beats first. So I figure out how it starts, I figure out I figure out major points along the middle, and then I'll figure out how it ends. And I might not know every detail about how it ends. It might be as simple as the good guys win. So I will typically do a little discovery writing along the way to figure out the details. For these books, for Under Lock or and Key, I knew the good guys won, but I didn't know how. And in Arts and Thefts, the sequel, I know who did it by the end. I knew who was responsible, but I wasn't sure how they managed to do that, and I wasn't always sure about. And although I knew some of the clues when I first went into that first draft, I didn't know exactly how the bad guys managed to do what they did. By the time I got to the end, that's when I'd figured things out, and knowing that, I was able to go back through the revisions and change things, make sure that it fit. All right. Oh, okay.
What advice would you give to undergraduates who hope to publish novels?
My advice for undergraduates who hope to publish novels is to keep at it. It's a numbers game. It takes a lot of persistence. The best thing that any aspiring writer can do is to continue honing their craft, keep learning how to write well, keep learning how to tell good stories, and then never give up when it comes to publishing, because you never know what's going to happen. If you're working to make yourself the best writer you can be, if you're working to write and continue writing, then odds are going to be good that sooner or later you're going to find a match. It's just work on yourself, focus on making yourself a better writer, and don't give up. All right. All right, well, thank you. That's it.